Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I am Kenneth Amanduri, and I'm joined today with a very special guest, James Corbett of the Corbett Report, open source intelligence news. We're going to be talking about the economy, the impacts of the coronavirus, precious metals, his thoughts on the impact on what we are seeing right now. Is this the bursting of a bubble that was inevitably going to pop, and the coronavirus was the pin? Does he think the coronavirus is going to continue to get worse? I mean, we were just talking before the interview here how it just feels like a new world, the Twilight Zone sort of atmosphere. And so without any further ado, James, thanks for coming on Crush the Street with me today.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
I want to remind everyone for an A to Z report up to date on the coronavirus, visit crushthestreet.com/V1. We'll have that in the description area. James, let's start off here. I'm curious what your thoughts are as far as the coronavirus itself. Is it the flu, like many would suggest? Is it something more dangerous than that? And I'd remind people that you're actually in Japan right now. And, the situation in Japan might be a little bit different than where we are now. But do you anticipate it spreading, the way a lot of the alarming projections are showing from many credible people on the internet? And of course, on the other side of the spectrum, you have Sean Hannity, Donald Trump saying, hey, this is going to be okay. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, this isn't a political issue. It's a medical issue. And I'm not a medical doctor of any sort. I'm not an epidemiologist. So don't take any medical advice from me. Personally, I am not worried in the least about this novel coronavirus, just me personally. And I'm not going out of my way to social distance myself from others and what have you. Having said that, I think it is exceptionally interesting that, as you mentioned, I'm here in Japan, in East Asia, where one would expect, you've seen what's happened in China, you've seen what's happened in South Korea, you would expect Japan would be going absolutely crazy and going bonkers with the quarantining and what have you, but it is not. And that's precisely because the Japanese government still is deluding itself into believing that the Tokyo 2020 Olympics are going to go ahead as planned, on the time schedule as planned, with spectators as planned from all around the world. They still think it's going to happen. Newsflash, it isn't. But the Japanese government has not admitted that yet. So the incentive of the government and the media here is to pretend it's all right, it's going to be okay in a few weeks, just keep on going with business. They did close down the schools here, but other than that, everything is going ahead normally, business as usual, emphasis on business, which I think goes to show something about the phenomenon that we're dealing with here. It's very possible. I don't even know what kind of virus is spreading or what have you, but it's very possible that there is something medically going on here. But it is not the end of the world. It is not the Black Plague. Hundreds of millions of people are not going to die from this. But the effects of this, and this is where I think I am more qualified to speak on, the effects of this economically, geopolitically, in terms of domestic politics, all of that is very real, and it is going to play out. It is predicated on this. I think we've entered into a new paradigm. The paradigm of the past 20 years was the war on terror. That was what was the guiding thing behind so much what was happening geopolitically and economically. And that was obviously starting to fade and get a bit long in the tooth, and people haven't been mentioning it as much recently. Well, that's because the new paradigm is now here. It has arrived. We've entered the age of coronavirus freakout, or whatever it's going to be called. And now we have to adjust our thinking along those lines. So in terms of the virus itself, personally, I am not worried about that. But the effects of it, I am exceptionally concerned about. And they are going to be long lasting. Because as you say, the economic effects of this, for one, are going to be, at this point, barely calculable.
So just to bounce off of some of the things you said, the optics of this, Japan trying to keep things, hey, this is cool, we're not too worried about it. I mean, is that fair to assume that that's why China didn't, contain this from the start. I mean, many people are accusing China of not jumping on this sooner when they knew about it for maybe, a few more weeks than they led people on to believe. It's like, hey, we're just trying not to stir a panic and overblow the situation. When Donald Trump first talked about it, he downplayed it, and of course had to take it to the next level with a lot of stimulus and all the procedures that we're seeing right now. I mean, right now in my county here in Texas, we're not allowed to gather in groups officially of more than 10 people. So, I mean, they're doing everything they can to self quarantine and flatten that curve as they're trying to do. So, any comments on just the optics, trying to keep people calm in this situation?
Yeah, as I say, I think the incentive of the Japanese government is to try to keep everything calm and pretend that everything's going ahead. And I expect, and here's my prediction, that when and if they finally do wake up to reality and admit that the games are going to have to be postponed or whatever the case may be, I think it's at that point that the incentive flips and suddenly there will be the freak out here in Japan, like there has been everywhere else. So I think there are definitely political incentives behind all of this, and at a certain point that switch flips, and the incentive may be to try to downplay it until you decide you're going in, and then you go all in, because every authoritarian power structure in the world benefits from what is happening right now in a power grab that would have been scarcely imaginable just months ago. We're now talking about a World War II type scenario and invoking old war powers acts and things that, again, just could not have been imagined just a few months ago. We're facing nationalization of industries and internal passports and things that again, I keep saying this because I don't know what else to say. We couldn't have even envisioned this a few months ago. Well, we could have, but it would have sounded absolutely insane. Now, this is what we are facing. We're staring right down that barrel. So I think once the incentive gets flipped, okay, well, then we'll make sure everything's okay, downplay it, doesn't matter. But once they go in, they go all in, because this is the power grab, and that's ultimately what this is going to be. A lot of agendas that were on the table before now are in play and are cranked up all the way. And again, we're just starting to see the thin edge of what that wedge actually looks like. And Trump is going all in with this, just like everyone else, because every government, every power structure benefits from hitting that alarm and hitting that hype up to absolute maximum pressure.
You know what's interesting about this whole thing is it's a global takedown. It's not just, oh, the Chinese get hurt and then the US benefits, or Europe gets hurt and Russia benefits. I mean, everyone goes down the same in a sense, or maybe not. Maybe there are some disadvantages, greater in certain areas than others. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that? To the extent that this whole world is in the matrix together, and so compared to everyone else, we're all at the same level to one degree or another. I mean, we're all coming down together. There's no way to opt out to some sort of alternative universe of a system that we would have.
Yeah, exactly right. That's a good point to make here, because some have been suggesting that this is the end of the age of globalization, because this is against everything that globalization is for. It shows the easy disruption of the just-in-time global supply chains. It shows the need for local and domestic manufacturing and self-sufficiency. It shows the need for tight control of borders and other things that go against the globalization that we've seen as the predominant trend over the past several decades. But actually, I think quite the opposite. I think it's a fail forward. This is a situation where now more than ever, we need global coordination of various bodies, because who's going to come in and save the day other than the IMF and the World Bank and the Bank for International Settlements and the World Health Organization? And all of these globalist bodies are going to benefit from this in big and obvious ways that should be hitting people right now. And so let me put on my conspiracy theorist hat, or conspiracy realist hat, which of course is made out of tinfoil. But yes, if you wanted some sort of crisis that was going to advance a globalist agenda, you'd be hard pressed to think of a better one, precisely because this is hitting, it travels across borders, it hits everyone. It's going to bring the whole world down, or at least the whole world will be succumb to the same panic. And you need international coordination to deal with it on some level, even if that coordination is just like what we saw in the last several hours, the US and Canada agreeing to close down the border, except for trade. details to follow. I mean, the news is so crazy and it's rolling so quickly that no one can actually keep a handle on it. But at any rate, this is clearly a global phenomenon. It's clearly going to require global coordination on a number of levels, which is exactly what a lot of people had in mind in the first place. So as I say, a lot of agendas that were already on the table, or at least in the planning stages, are now in play and are being cranked as hard as they can go. And that's what I think this is ultimately about. In fact, if you go back to the Club of Rome a couple of decades ago, writing a document like the First Global Revolution, in which they said that global warming would fit the bill in terms of a type of crisis that we could all unite behind, because it makes humanity the enemy of man. Why? Because we're these dirty human beings that are polluting the globe, and that's causing this problem. So how do we crack down on it? Well, we've got to crack down on everybody. And that's exactly what they want to do anyway. So ding, 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 this is perfect. And exact same way, now this invisible, deadly virus that's spreading all over the place, anyone could be an asymptomatic carrier. You don't even know it. You have this virus, you don't even know it. But now the government can come along and say, look, you had contact with this person a couple of weeks ago, which we got through your geolocation data, which, oh, by the way, now we're scooping up from everyone in plain sight because we have to track where this virus is moving. And we've determined you had contact with this person. So now you have to go into quarantine or we'll throw you in jail. Again, so many, I don't even know how to parcel all of this out yet, because so many different agendas are coming together, but it is certainly music to, I think, the globalists' ear.
James, as far as the economy goes, the stock market, I mean, limit down orders is, halting of stocks is now becoming a normal thing. I mean, it was not a very normal thing. Now we're seeing it on a regular basis now. The Dow Jones has gone below 20,000. I think we've lost close to $15 trillion in domestic value in the stock market. It's been predicted that U.S. airlines will collectively lose 113 billion in revenues this year due to the coronavirus. I mean, we're seeing a global grind when it comes to the economy. People I talk to, one thing that it kind of frustrates me seeing it now is, so many of us might have thought, hey, we're in our moat, we're protected, we got a good thing going with our job, but this black swan has totally disrupted the lives of, everyone. I don't care who you are. I mean, we've all been impacted by this. Even if you saw it coming, you prepared, you got savings, we're all being impacted by this one way or another. And here we are. I mean, how much of a grind is this going to be on the economy? I mean, if there's any sort of metric you would expect on what you plan to see with stocks, I mean, how badly do you expect this crash to get?
Well, actually, just a couple of weeks ago, I was writing in my newsletter, as this was beginning to affect the U.S. markets, I was writing the roller coaster ride has begun, where I was just taking a look at the VIX and noting, even at the time that I was writing this article, the VIX still hadn't reached its highest point yet. It was still at 54.18 when I was writing this. The all-time high had been set in October 2008 after the Lehman collapse at 59.89. Of course, since then, it's spiked up to 74 the last time I took a look at it. So it's definitely hit new records. But I was noting at that time that just how incredible what was taking place at that time was. Back to back gains and losses in excess of 3 standard deviations in a single day. Just had only happened 6 times in history to that point, 3 of which had occurred in the 29 crash. So here it is, big flashing, like you cannot get a better signal that we're heading into Great Depression territory. And that was a week and a half ago. That seems like forever ago at this point. Yeah, now it's gone even crazier. So, limit downs, stoppages are becoming common. 1,000 through 3,000 point losses on a single day is becoming the norm. Absolutely incredible. And even if the coronavirus and all of the pandemic freakout was to disappear from the face of the earth tomorrow, it's still, the economic effects of this are baked into the cake. There has still been such a profound disruption of the economy that we're going to be feeling this. I mean, again, even if it disappeared tomorrow, we'd be feeling it for months, if not years afterward. But the longer this drags on, the more of a generationally defining event economically this becomes. And I do raise the big Great Depression specter precisely because you and me and many other people have been documenting over the past 12 years of this complete economic unreality of central bank created everything bubble that was used to inflate things back up after the Lehman collapse. That is popping now. This is the pop. I don't know if everyone's got that message yet, but yes, this is the pop. And this is the pin that is pricking that bubble. And again, regardless of what you think of the pin and anything to do with that, it is happening, and we have to deal with this right now. People who are still invested in the stock market, like this is going to be their savior at this point, are not thinking the right way. And as you say, even the people who do think of themselves as prepared and have taken steps to prepare themselves and their family economically and otherwise, unless you are living on bugs and rainwater in the middle of nowhere and have no direct human contact, you are not going to just waltz through this as if it's some sort of wonderland. No, anyone who has human beings and contact with other people in this world as it exists right now is going to be profoundly affected by what's coming from this. I don't want to sound alarmist, but when you are rational in a world that is transforming in front of your eyes, it's going to sound like alarm to people who haven't quite caught on to what's happening yet. But yes, this is a generational event that we will be talking about for the rest of our lives. Again, not necessarily because of the virus, but because of the effects that are playing out right now that will profoundly affect the future course of human civilization in some ways. And as you say, I mean, airlines and restaurants and all sorts of different industries are being profoundly disrupted by this. And that floats the specter of all sorts of nationalization and other sorts of things that, again, we couldn't have thought of before, but now it's suddenly on the table. And how do you go from here? Universal basic income sounded like crazy Andrew Yang talk a few months ago. Now it's, well, of course, you've got to just pour thousands of dollars into everyone's bank account overnight, and that'll fix the economy, right? Of course it won't, but this is the type of thing that's now being floated. So again, every single bet is off the table because everything has been changed.
Wow. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. It's definitely a 9/11 type event. It's, World War II type impact when it comes to the legacy this is going to leave. And I mean, who knows? Maybe, we'll be cleaner going forward here. I know everyone's washing their hands a lot more, but I got to get your thoughts on, society. I mean, how badly is this going to disrupt supply chains and, people being able to eat and get groceries and survive? I know right now there's the community is doing a lot to help older people, letting them in the grocery stores early so they don't maybe have to be in lines and, deal with the chaos. And, people are offering to help. But, at some point, if people can't help themselves, how are they going to be helping other people? Right? I mean, at what point does this just completely break down?
Absolutely 100% right. If you can't even help yourself, then you're in no position to be helping others, which is precisely why so much of my work over the past decade has been geared towards the solutions for exactly this type of crisis or any type of profound disruption. The solutions have been there, and people have seen them at any rate, but it's a lot of work. Who wants to do all of that? So I've talked, for example, about things like guerrilla gardening, actually getting out there, getting your hands dirty, and at the very least knowing your food suppliers, if not growing some yourself, but getting involved in the local farmers markets and understanding what is in your physical area, your geographical location that, hey, by the way, you might be confined to for a period of weeks or months, or who knows how long these types of crises will last. And community organizations, alternative and complementary currencies, cryptocurrencies, precious metals, other ways of diversifying yourself away from this extremely tightly controlled fiat funny money system that's been shoved down everyone's throats. And there are lots of different ideas out there, but the time to get involved with those ideas was yesterday, or a month from yesterday, or 8 years ago, or whenever. The time is not when the crisis is actually happening. I mean, I guess better late than never, but yeah, absolutely. People who don't already have some sort of community infrastructure for dealing with this type of crisis are going to be far, far behind. And how many people really do at this stage even know their neighbors, let alone interact with them, in alternative or complementary currencies or what have you, or have the infrastructure to survive whatever happens, bank runs, gold confiscation, I mean, again, who knows where this goes from here? But things that could not have been thought before are thinkable now. Exactly as in the 1929 crash, and a few years later, the government comes along and collects everyone's gold. It's illegal for you to own your own gold. We're going to come and collect it. Don't worry, we'll pay you $35 an ounce. And again, that kind of thing can happen. And if people have the community infrastructure to deal with it, they can deal with it. But if everyone's trying to be the isolated island, no one's making it out as an island without support from the community.
James, the next thing that I'd like to touch on is something that you've briefly mentioned, which is precious metals. What are your thoughts on precious metals at the moment? We're seeing the crisis happen, obviously massive sell-offs in the financial markets, and we're seeing margin calls affect gold, affect silver in the futures market. Silver down to $12, on the spot price. And one thing I would mention though is, I can't find a silver eagle under $20 anywhere on the internet. I've talked to multiple bullion dealers. Any thoughts on this and what you expect to see happen with gold and silver?
Lots of thoughts about this, one of which is that what we're seeing in the spot prices is a reflection of the unwinding that is happening, everyone taking cash, taking physical possession of their money, which is, of course, driving up the dollar right now. But that is, of course, just the first order effect of this type of crisis, where people literally have nowhere to turn at this point. I mean, where are you going to put your money? Bonds? Stocks? No, of course not. So people are physically taking cash. Banks are running out of $100 bills because people are trying to unwind in that way just to figure out what to do with it. Stuff it under the mattress, maybe. And that is, of course, driving down the spot price because the dollar goes up, the spot price is going down. But as you say, the physical, actually getting your hands on it is a different thing altogether. And I have a lot of anecdata on that I've been reading. From various parts in the US, for example, people talking about dealers having a difficult time getting their possession of physical bullion and people not being able to buy it. I can attest to that here in Japan, that the spot price is going down. It's a great time to be buying if you can actually get it. And you go to store after store. Well, we actually don't have any at the moment, but we're expecting to get some more next week. And we'll put your name down. So it is happening. The physical disconnect from the spot price is certainly taking place before people's eyes right now. So, and as I say, that spot price going down is really just a reflection of that first order of the chaos to come, because people are trying to get into cash right now, which is driving the dollar up. But once this continues to play out, I don't think the ultimate long-term trend for this is for the dollar to keep going up and the spot price to keep going down. It's just a question of when that inflection point hits and the spot price is going back up. But yeah, I think this might be a good time to, if you can, get your hands on some physical silver and gold and see what you can do with that.
Well, I mean, like I said, I can't get my hands on, anything on like a silver eagle, $22, $23 many places. I mean, I was buying when it was $17, $16, and, I can get one in the $18 range, with the $2 premium, right? And now the spot price is significantly lower. And in theory, my silver is up, if I was to actually sell it right now. But I mean, crazy times. I mean, 120 to 1 type ratios with gold and silver. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Does it bother you that silver has gotten so out of whack? Does it show that it's impacted by the industrial metal component of it more so than gold? And how big of a deal is that going to be going forward here as we see this economic grind continue to play out?
That is one factor that plays into that. And so, yes, the industrial utility of that does have a role to play, especially as the industrial world comes to a grinding, screeching halt. That is going to depress commodity prices generally, at least in their commodity function. So that, I think, has some play in that. But obviously, the profound disconnect right now between gold and silver, that incredible ratio, is something of the beach ball that's been pushed underwater. So I would expect that to come back up to the surface at some point. Again, it's a buying opportunity if you can physically get your hands on it, I would say. But again, as I say, I've always been of the opinion, once the real profound disconnect happens, and gold hits $50,000 an ounce or whatever may be coming. At that point, I mean, that's the point at which they come along with the confiscation and give us your gold, please. Except the please is in the form of an executive order signed by the president, and it's not delivered with nice guys at your door with flowers. It's delivered at the barrel of a gun. So that's when things get really real, is when that profound disconnect happens. So in some respects, I don't even want that to happen. I just want people who know the actual value of these metals to trade amongst themselves with metals rather than going through the fiat and worrying about the fiat connection. No, the real value of this is not in what it's worth in fiat dollars today. It is in what it is actually valued at by people who know what they're doing. And again, that's another aspect of this community side of it. If you are part of a community, whether physical or virtual or whatever it is, that understands and values this and is willing to trade in it, well, then you have something functioning that's different from this system that we know is collapsing around our heads right now. So that's an important aspect of this. Again, if you have a community that understands and values something in the proper way, you don't have to worry about whatever the spot price is today, except in terms of what it will get you that you can buy with your fiat dollars.
James, I promised you I'd have you off in 30 minutes, but I have one more question for you, if that's okay. I just want to ask you about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in this environment. Obviously, Bitcoin has been slammed as well. The sell-off has obviously impacted Bitcoin in this environment. Seem to be holding up well here at $5,000. We'll see if it ages throughout the time I stop recording and upload this video. But what are your thoughts on Bitcoin? Is it something that you feel is a good buy in this environment, or do you anticipate it potentially going lower?
I advocate diversification. So I certainly do not think put all your eggs in the crypto basket, or Bitcoin in particular, because again, let's keep in mind, Bitcoin is just one particular flavor of crypto generally, which it has its own issues. So I certainly would never suggest putting even a big chunk of savings into that, but it is a place, one of the baskets that people should be carrying, I think, right now. And it is funny, as someone who first got interested or really started following Bitcoin when it was, I think, somewhere in the $100 or $50 range, maybe. At that time, people saying that's a stupid, ridiculous bubble, $50. It's going to crash tomorrow. And now we're saying, oh, it's only $5,000. I mean, that you got to keep it in perspective of. I don't even mean the long term. I mean, it's only been a decade or so that this has even existed, and it's at $5,000. I mean, that speaks to something. And there will be people who say it's just another form of fiat and it's backed up by nothing. Well, it's technically backed up by proof of work, which is generated on the back of a lot of electricity, etc. But at any rate, it is another thing that people should be holding. And I think specifically because its use case, its real use case, is ability to transport vast sums across borders without physically transporting, as there was an interesting case recently of someone who got stuck in Amsterdam with I think it was several kilos of gold in their luggage that they couldn't account for or wouldn't account for to the authorities at the Amsterdam airport. So of course it all gets seized and they get thrown in jail for money laundering, because you can't prove that you own this thing that you're carrying. With Bitcoin, that's not an issue. So that's one of the use cases for this. Again, I think people have to stop investing in the idea of things as one total solution for everything. Precious metals absolutely has a reason, and that people should be holding it. Crypto is another, there has its own set of reasons people should be holding it. Alternative or complementary currencies. There's many different things on the table, and I don't understand why people would limit the number of arrows in their quiver. No, put every arrow you can in there. But everyone has to decide for themselves how much they're willing to invest in this or that, and that obviously depends on their own use case and what they're expecting to use it for. But anyway, I think crypto is something that people who know what they're doing should look into. Again, I know the learning curve is very steep for some people, and perhaps just technologically they're not set up to be able to handle it. And in that case, don't invest a thing, because lots of people have lost lots of money because they don't even know how to secure a wallet. If you're in that crowd, do not proceed until you understand the basic principles of what it is you're doing.
It's quite the world. And, it really goes to show how much all of this is just an experiment. When you think our normal is solidified, there's some sort of economic law that just binds everything together, you realize this is all an experiment, and the whole, we as humans, as a society, are just figuring out day after day how it's to work. And, obviously we're seeing the booms and busts of this experiment. And I wish everyone the best when it comes to traversing these troubled waters. So, James, thank you so much for coming on Crush the Street with me today. If people want to learn more about you and your work, please let them know a little bit more about your website and the Corbett Report.
I suggest people go to corbettreport.com. That's CORBETT report.com. I have thousands upon thousands of hours of audio and video media that's up there completely for free. I do have a subscriber newsletter, but even the editorial that I write for that is available for free. And I always suggest, if you're new to the Corbett Report, just go through the material and don't think about subscribing or anything like that. Just see what is out there, because I put out a lot of work, especially on issues like what we are seeing playing out right now, economically, geopolitically, and otherwise. So I hope it is a valuable resource for people, because I know people are thirsty for information right now. There's so much happening so quickly that it's easy to get in over your head and start to freak out and panic. So information is your friend. I hope the Corbett Report will be one resource that people can use to put a little bit more information in their head and hopefully find a way through this, because yeah, we've been talking very seriously about some very big things that are happening right now, and they are happening, but humanity will pull through in some form, and we get to decide what form that is by the actions that we take and what we choose to invest our time and money and energy thinking and doing and transacting in this world. So let's put it towards something of use, and I hope corbettreport.com will be one guide that people can use for that.
Good word, James. And thank you so much for taking the time. Everyone, visit the Corbett Report. And if you enjoyed this interview, please share it and visit James's work. James, thanks for coming on Crush the Street with me today.
Thanks for having me on.